the moonlight.
An excellent day for an exorcism.
I'm your number one fan.
Hey up and welcome back to Rate Scary, the horror podcast where we talk about all things that are rate scary, in my humble opinion. I am your host, my name is Zara, otherwise known as Scary Zara Mary, and I am so glad to have you here. I've taken a little bit of time off from recording and editing and publishing and promoting. It has been absolutely lovely. I do apologise that I haven't published in a couple of weeks, but I definitely needed the break, and now I'm coming back with a vengeance, like a horror villain that just refuses to be killed. And I suppose part of the reason why I needed to take a little bit of time off is because I saw an absolutely phenomenal film, which is the one that I'm going to be talking about today in this bonus episode. And I had to see it again, and then I had to stew on it, and then I had to listen to other people talk about it who are experts in this topic. And it just became such a huge thing. Like it's become one of my favorite films ever, I think. And the task of actually talking about it almost became too overwhelming at one point, actually putting pen to paper and jotting down some notes that I wanted to talk about. But I have finally managed to do it. And today's film that we are going to be talking about is Sinners from 2025. I am going to warn you, there's going to be heavy spoilers. So if you haven't seen Sinners yet, oh, you are missing out. Please do go and see it as soon as possible on the biggest screen possible. Save this episode and come back to it because I think you're going to absolutely love it. The hype is real around this film. I'm sure you've seen plenty of other people talking about it, and I'm just going to add to that. I'm going to be waxing lyrical about this film today. But what I will say as a bit of a caveat is, given the topics that are in this film, given the themes that are in this film, I am by no means an expert on those topics and themes. And actually, I want to kind of upfront talk about a few people who I have been watching all of their videos and understanding the discourse around the film through them. And I would highly encourage you to go and follow them because they are far more proficient in talking about this film than I am. But I'm going to do my absolute best today. So the first person that I want to recommend is a friend of mine, Amelia, otherwise known as Clark's Capers online. She is an expert when it comes to blues music. She used to be a blues singer. The film centers heavily around that genre of music. Amelia regularly talks about Black representation in horror specifically, as well as other films. And she has been wonderful to learn from. So if you're not following Amelia at Clark's Capers already, please go and do so. The other person that I want to mention is the Real for Real podcast. Fantastic insight into some of the nuances of the film, especially some of the smaller things in the film that might get overlooked, but amazing insight into slavery and mutilation of Black people during that period. And then two others, in fact, three others actually. I'm going to add a third one in. The Real Voice has done a few really good videos actually breaking down some of the details of Sinners, one of which I'm going to reference a little bit later on. Screened and Scored has done so many videos going into so much detail on Sinners. It's insane. It's absolutely blown my mind. I think there's like 9 or 10 videos. And then you've got Straw Hat Goofy, very popular TikToker, Instagrammer, has kind of become close with Ryan Coogler, the writer-director of this film, and has done some brilliant interviews with him. He's had him on his own podcast. And again, you get to see that kind of peek behind the curtain with Ryan Coogler into his process and how he's approached things with this film. So I just wanted to get that up front. These are brilliant people to go and follow, especially regarding this film, but generally anyway. And I will be referencing a couple of things that I have seen and heard them talking about as I go into my review. So as usual, we are going to kick off with the story, first of all, and I'll give you a rundown of that. So this is your last chance if you haven't seen it and you don't want it spoiled. Get out now, go watch the film. And then I'll actually go into some of the detail that surrounds this utterly wonderful film. So the film is set in 1932 in Mississippi, and we open with a guy called Sammy Moore who staggers into his father's church with a large claw mark on his face, and he's clinging onto a broken guitar neck. Claiming that music has some sort of dangerous supernatural power, his father asks him to give up music and repent, and we see these horrific flashes from Sammy's memory before we cut to the day before. We're then introduced to Sammy's cousins, Smoke and Stack. They are identical twins, they're World War I veterans. They've returned to Mississippi after several years in Chicago, and they explain to their old friends that Chicago is not quite the racial paradise that they were hoping for. But using money that they stole from Chicago gangsters, they buy a sawmill from a racist landowner, Hogwood, planning to start a juke joint for the local black community. And they recruit Sammy, who is a guitarist. They recruit Delta Slim, who is a piano and harmonica player. And they also recruit Pearline, who is a singer. And they hire Smoke's estranged wife, Annie, and Chinese shopkeepers Grace and Bo Chow to cater for the opening night. We then get a scene where Stack is awkwardly reuniting with his ex-girlfriend Mary, who passes white but she's secretly 1/8 black, and Mary is upset that Stack abandoned her to go north. Stack responds that it is not practical for a white woman to marry a black man. We then also get a scene with Smoke, who has met up with his ex-partner Annie, and he argues with her about her interest in the occult, but Annie claims that her rituals kept the twins safe. Smoke responds that their infant daughter still died in the process, though. In another scene, we see a man kind of jumping into frame. His skin is burnt and he is running towards a house. And we learn that this is a guy named Remick, an Irish immigrant on the run from roving Choctaws. And he bribes a couple who are Klansmen, Bert and Joan, for refuge before turning them into vampires. And it turns out that the Choctaws were actually vampire hunters. We then see that the Juke Bar has opened. It's loud, it's joyful, there's a brilliant crowd, and the trusting Stack and compassionate Annie cajole the cynical Smoke into giving discounts to customers who can't afford to pay more for the drinks. Sammy's musical performance completely entrances the crowd, transcending time and conjuring spirits from the past and future, unbeknownst to himself and the crowd. This, however, catches the attention of Remick, Bert, and Joan, who arrive and offer money for entry. Smoke and Stack sense something isn't quite right, but Mary offers to speak with the trio as the bar needs the money. Remick, however, turns her into a vampire. She returns to the bar, seduces Stack, and bites him, seemingly killing him. Smoke shoots her numerous times, but Mary is completely unaffected by the bullets and runs outside. Annie convinces Smoke to evacuate the bar, but this allows the vampires to turn the patrons as they exit. Bo agrees to pick up a getaway vehicle, but he is turned too, and the bar staff learn that vampires cannot enter a human building without an invitation. Stack is shut in a room where he died, but he is revived as a vampire. Annie, however, forces him to flee with pickled garlic juice that she throws at him, and Annie teaches the rest of the crowd that only a wooden stake or silver can kill vampires, and gives Smoke a talisman to ward off the vampires. Remick attempts to cut a deal with the staff, explaining that he's not racist like the clan and values Sammy's supernatural musical skills. He argues that vampirism will give the staff immortality, power and community, and freedom from racial persecution. He also warns Smoke that if he does not accept the vampire's help, Hogwood, who is secretly the local clan boss, will kill them in the morning. The staff decline the offer. A visibly distraught and nerve-wrought Grace goads Remick and his army of vampires to attack the remaining survivors after Remick and Bo threaten to hurt her daughter. The vampire horde rushes the juke joint and battles the remaining survivors. And in the ensuing struggle, both Grace and Bo perish together in fire after Grace stakes Bo through the heart. Annie is bitten by Stack and Mercy killed by Smoke as per her request. Delta is viciously mauled and bitten to death by a mob of vampires in a bid to buy time for the rest of the group to escape. And the remaining survivors, consisting of Smoke, Sammy and Pearline, attempt to escape the establishment through the upper floor, only to have their escape attempt thwarted by Remick and Stack. Smoke and Stack engage in a one-on-one fight while both Sammy and Pearline battle Remick, Perline is bitten in the process in an attempt to free a struggling Sammy against Remick and urges Sammy to abandon her. Sammy successfully evacuates the juke joint and runs to a car to escape, only to be stopped by Remick once again. Remick offers Sammy one last chance to join his side, though Sammy breaks his guitar and wounds Remick. A surviving Smoke arrives just in time to stake Remick. The dawn approaches, delivering the final blow to Remick and the rest of the vampires that are present, effectively concluding the horrors of the night. Smoke sends Sammy home, and true to Remick's prediction, Hogwood and a group of clan members arrive to reclaim the juke joint. Smoke engages with the group in a firefight and effortlessly dispatches all assailants, but not before sustaining a fatal wound in his side. In his final moments, a near-death Smoke sees Annie and their baby daughter in the afterlife, who encourages Smoke to join them. Smoke does so accordingly and succumbs to his wounds. The scene then shifts back to Sammy at the church, which is the scene that we saw right at the beginning, with his father urging him to renounce his love for the blues. Sammy refuses, and he drives north, guitar in hand. Now we then get a mid-credit scene set in 1992 where we see an elderly Sammy, now a popular blues musician, and he's visited by modern-day ageless Stack and Mary, who managed to escape that fateful night. It's later revealed in a flashback that Smoke struck a deal with Stack for Sammy's freedom in exchange for Stack's life, and the couple offers Sammy an opportunity at immortality, though Sammy declines. Stack requests that Sammy to play a song for old time's sake, to which the musician obliges. And in a final parting moment, Sammy confesses that, although he still has nightmares about that evening, up until the sun set, it was the best day of his life. Stack agrees, as it was the last time he saw his brother and the sun, and the only time he felt truly free. And we then get a wonderful post-credit scene of Sammy singing in his church. Oh, what an incredible, incredible story. Made incredible not just by the writing, but a fantastic cast that we have. So I just wanted to go through them. Normally I'd only go through maybe one or two characters, but there were such exceptional performances from so many people in this film. Starting off first of all with one of our leads, which is Sammy, played by Miles Caton. I thought he was just phenomenal. This is the first thing I've seen him in. I think it's his first major role. His singing is absolutely gorgeous. I love that he has this kind of quiet, mellow temperament to him throughout the film. He has a wonderful character arc that we see. I mean, the fact that the film does a complete arc in itself. The film starts with our end scene, and we understand everything that Sammy has been through in the last 24 hours. And the final two scenes that we get in the mid-credit scene and the post-credit scene are so emotional, especially, like, I can feel myself getting emotional now just talking about it, especially the scene right at the very end with him playing the blues in his father's church. I could listen to Miles Caton sing over and over again, and I'm really, really excited to see exactly what he does next. I would hope for more horror, but I would go and watch him in anything. We've then obviously got Smoke and Stack, our twins, which are both played by Michael B. Jordan, and I think that could have been initially a bit of a gimmick for him to play both characters, but he does it in such a way that makes them individual, and you almost forget that it's not two actors. I think it was really refreshing to see Michael B. Jordan in this sort of role, especially in a horror film, because I think this is the first horror film that he's done, and he's not actually that keen on horror. I think his characters have real depth. I think there's a light and a dark to them. There's so much detail that I could talk about with regards to Smoke and Stack. And I've seen a lot of people talking about, actually, they would love to see a prequel of Smoke and Stack, because if you go onto the official Sinners page on Spotify, there are a couple of news articles on there, fake news articles, and there's one that is on there that details how Smoke and Stack made their money through bank robberies. Like, we get hints that they've been working in Chicago, that they've been working with the Irish and the Italians and Al Capone. The first page in that newspaper clipping is from their hometown paper, and it outlines the outcome of a bank robbery along with a description of the brothers' personalities as recounted by eyewitnesses, including Stack's smooth-talking, commanding nature and Smoke's more abrasive, violent streak. And that robbery occurred in 1924, so 8 years prior to this film. And then the second page details the clash between the Italian mafia and the Irish mob in Chicago following the arrest of Al Capone. And the paper states the two fractions are at each other's throats as they vie for control in the city as the vacuum left by Capone's arrest. And it specifically states that both sides accuse each other of stealing in an illegal alcoholic hoard. I think it's fantastic that we see throughout the film the Smokestack twins filling the Club Duke with cases of both Irish beer and Italian wine from their truck, clearly implicating them in the brewing gang war in the North. They are the ones that caused that, and then they just whipped out of Chicago and went back home. Michael B. Jordan was phenomenal. I love him anyway. I loved him in Black Panther. I really enjoyed him in Creed. I want to see him do more horror. 100%. I just want to see more of Sinners, basically. We then, of course, have our villain, which is Remick, the vampire, played by Jack O'Connell, who I loved well before this film. I loved him in Skins. I love him in Eden Lake. Like, in both of those things, he is sinister anyway, but he doesn't come across in that same sinister way in Sinners. He is so likable in Sinners. And again, there is just so much depth to his character. The fact that he's Irish. I think it's really clever that we have an Irish vampire who remembers the Christians taking his father's land, using vampirism as egalitarianism for allure in the 1930s Black American community, because Remick feels like he relates to that community, but at the same time, he's employed the tools of white supremacy by erasing individual culture and heritage to create this entity that offers fellowship and community. And again, like I talked about with the Smokestack twins, there is an article on Spotify, a newspaper clipping. The front page is from a Boston newspaper, and it describes a mysterious discovery in the Boston harbor of an Irish immigrant ship that turned up completely devoid of life. And the ship's cabin was burned down and there was blood everywhere, but there were no people aboard the ship, despite reports that lights and music were seen and heard. But the final key point is that an eyewitness saw one man take off from the ship with his skin smoking before disappearing into the shadows. And the story clearly outlines how Remick first came to America in 1911 from his native island, and the ship he crosses the Atlantic on is named the Celtic Hare, but it's clearly meant to be a bit of a stand-in for the famous ship that Dracula crossed the sea on in Bram Stoker's Dracula, which is named the Demeter. But it also sheds a light on exactly how long Remick has been in America, which is a relatively short time frame in his life, which is implied to be over 600 years long. So yeah, Jack O'Connell, his singing's beautiful, his dancing was wonderful, his acting, while he did come across as sinister, he does it in such a warm and likable way. I mean, we're going to touch on the themes, but that temptation that he has, he's very inviting regardless of what background you are, whether you're a member of the clan, whether you are inside the juke joint, doesn't matter. He's going to invite you in somehow. Someone else that absolutely deserves a mention is Wunmi Masako, who plays Annie. Oh, she is just absolutely gorgeous. I recognized her immediately from being in the Loki TV series. She's in the Marvel Universe. And I just think she is absolutely gorgeous, but a wonderful, balanced, delicate actor who brings a real level of emotion to the film. Her relationship that she has with Smoke when he drops by to pay his respects to their baby before reigniting his romance. I read that entire scene, that reunion scene, was actually her audition scene, and her chemistry read with Michael B. Jordan went so well that Ryan Coogler cast her in the room on the spot. And I also love that they've cast a woman with this body type as the female romantic lead. Just seeing someone who is curvaceous and isn't portrayed as matronly or maternal or frumpy or any of those things. Like, she is sexy, she is intelligent, she is romantic, she is the one that everyone listens to. Like, when she tells everyone that this is a vampire situation that they're dealing with, they believe her immediately. There is absolutely no question. And I loved her in it. The other romantic lead that I want to mention is Haley Steinfeld as Mary. She had some of the best lines in this film. So saying things like, "So you rob trains and banks, but you can't steal this pussy for a night." Like, the line that she delivers saying, "We're going to kill every last one of you."
We're gonna kill every last one of you.
But the best one that had my jaw open was, I heard you loud and clear, but then you stuck your tongue in my coos and you fucked me so hard I figured you changed your mind." I just think it, like, she delivers it so brilliantly. I only really knew Haley Steinfeld from, this is embarrassing, Pitch Perfect 3, which I thought she was brilliant in. I'm such a sucker for the Pitch Perfect films. So to actually see her in more of a serious role was great. I think she looked gorgeous. I love the fact that there is this level of complexity to the film with regards to the fact that she passes as white and what the perception is within that community. The fact that her and Stack, according to him, cannot be together because of that, even though she does have Black heritage, I thought was really, really interesting and a very clever inclusion from Ryan Coogler that adds a whole other level of commentary with regards to colorism within the Black community. And I thought she did a fantastic job. The other person that I want to mention, and I know there are other characters that are absolutely worth mentioning, but I could be here for hours and hours. But Delta Slim, played by Delroy Lindo, I thought was absolutely needed in this film because you get two extremes with Delta Slim. You get this fantastic look into the history and the culture of the region in the Mississippi Delta, talking about how Black men in particular have been treated by the white community. We get those scenes where he's in the car with the Smokestack twins and with Sammy, and he's going past the chain gang and talking about his friend, the fact that he was castrated and dragged through the streets. But then we also get this complete swing the other way, where we get really funny one-liners from Delta Slim. The fact that he asks at one point, "Can you smell that?" And someone says no, and then he responds by saying, "I think I just shat myself."
Yo, smell anything? I think I shat myself.
Like, you need that level of humor, and that is done right as the vampires are wanting to come in and attack and get everyone, and Delta Slim is just chucking in a one-liner like that. I think is brilliant. I think Delroy Lindo is phenomenal. I want to listen to an audiobook from him. I think his voice is wonderful. But that cast would be, unfortunately, nothing, I think, if it wasn't for the incredible writing and direction from Ryan Coogler. I was already familiar with Ryan Coogler's work. I haven't seen all of his back catalogue. I am a huge fan of the Black Panther films and Creed, like I said. I haven't seen Fruitvale Station, but this film has made me want to go back and watch the films that I haven't seen of his. I have found it absolutely fascinating, like I mentioned at the top of the episode, watching his interviews with Straw Hat Goofy. He's just so modest and humble and down to earth and very self-critical, actually. I saw Straw Hat Goofy doing an interview with him before Ryan Coogler was going to do a video about what it is to shoot in IMAX and how that comes across on the screen and the technicalities behind IMAX. And Ryan Coogler was so in his head about whether people were going to find this interesting and should I really be doing this, and or maybe it's not the best idea. I've heard only wonderful things from people that have worked with him, saying that his process is fantastic. He clearly has a lot of fun on set while also making sure that the themes of the film land in the right way and have real importance. And I'm very excited to learn actually that I think his next project is going to be the X-Files, which is intriguing. I remember watching X-Files when I was younger, but only through my cousin who loved the X-Files, so occasionally I'd see an episode. So I would quite like to see a reboot of that, especially if Ryan Coogler is going to be behind it. But I think there's a couple of other stars in this film, aside from the cast, aside from Ryan Coogler. The first one being the cinematographer. So the director of photography is Autumn Durald Akpor. Like, first of all, the fact that this film is filmed on IMAX cameras, it's an exceptionally difficult thing to do. It's a very expensive thing to do. There are not enough female cinematographers, and she is the first one to do so on IMAX film. I need so many posters of this film because I feel like this is one of those movies where you could pause it at any point and it would just look gorgeous. Any still within the film would just look absolutely stunning, and that is down to her. I mean, never mind the actual technicalities of filming Michael B. Jordan as two different characters, the fact that they've had to do so with a special camera. So one scene in particular, which is absolutely incredible when you actually look at the technicality that is required to deliver it, is the scene right before the Smokestack twins buy the juke joint, and they are stood outside leaning against their car, and one lights a cigarette and passes it to another. Like, when you really think about it, to get that right, you've got to film it twice, both times with the same actor playing different roles. But how the fuck do you pass a lit cigarette from one to the other? Like, it's lit, so it's got to be a certain length smoked down. It's got to be delivered at the right height for them to pass it to each other. And I read that they did so using beats, so it's almost choreographed. And actually, at the time of shooting, there would be beeps and buzzers playing, which would signify when Michael B. Jordan needed to hit certain marks. That must have taken forever to do. And I think it's fascinating. I want to go back and read more about it. I mean, I would love to see an entire behind-the-scenes documentary about this film. I think that's what would be really interesting, all the research and everything that went into it. Because with regards to the cinematography as well, I read that Autumn consulted with Christopher Nolan because of IMAX, and also his business partner and wife, just to be able to do this in the right way. Obviously, Christopher Nolan is very experienced when it comes to IMAX. But I'd love to see Autumn's process with regards to the cinematography, because I think that is one of the biggest shining lights with regards to this film. It's the reason why I saw the film the first time. I rated it 5 stars. I then booked to see it less than 24 hours later, and I specifically booked IMAX because I thought I need to see this film on an even bigger screen to appreciate it. It's still in cinemas now, and I'm tempted to go back and see it a third time. That's how much I have loved it. And it's mainly down to that cinematography. The other thing, which is truly mind-blowing in this film, is the music. The compositions of music in this film. We've got Coogler's frequent collaborator Ludwig Göransson, who worked on the soundtrack of Sinners, and he describes Sinners as a personal and ambitious score reflecting his own musical journey. He drew inspiration from blues music. He performed the score on a 1932 Dobro Cyclops resonator guitar, which is the same one that Sammy carries around during the film. And during pre-production, Coogler sent Göransson several recordings from the 1930s and 40s, particularly those of Robert Johnson, which we'll come on to. And Coogler also insisted that Ludwig's wife, Serena, produces the songs. They are longtime collaborators. She is a classically trained violinist, and she said that she felt like a steward on this project, especially with the music, and said that Southern Black music had to be handled with real care and expert consultation. The couple worked with a number of different people in order to get the music absolutely perfect for this film, which if you've seen the film, you will understand. The music is the thing that made me cry the most times throughout the film over the acting. They worked with people like Lawrence Boone Mitchell, who is a blues producer. He owns Royal Studios. They visited the B.B. King Museum. They visited local juke joints in Clarksdale and other places for inspiration. They brought in blues musicians in order to do the recordings, including a very prominent blues musician, Buddy Guy, who is actually portraying Sammy in that mid-credits scene. They rented a studio converted from a church in New Orleans, which is why you get this phenomenal sound to some of the music. And I just think, like, I've listened to the playlist so many times since seeing the film in order just to really truly listen. Similar to the film, there are so many layers to the music when you actually listen to it. It is utterly beautiful. And I'm not a music person, I'm a film person. I'm not a music detailed person. I never remember album names. I'll never really listen to an album all the way through. I rarely remember artist names. I'm kind of all about film. I'll remember a director, an actor, and things like that, and the year that a film came out. But this soundtrack is different. This soundtrack I could listen to obsessively, and I have done so since the film released. And like, if this doesn't win an absolute truckload of awards for everything about the film, but specifically that music, then I give up. I give up on mainstream awards. With regards to the music, there is one scene that absolutely has to be spoken about, and this is this scene in the juke joint where Sam is playing his music. And right at the beginning of the film, we open with this monologue from Wumi Masako's character Annie, where she's talking about the fact that there are some people throughout life whose music can call upon the ancestors and also create spirits from both the past, present, and the future. And we see that come to life in this scene in the juke joint when Sammy is playing. So Sammy begins his concert at the juke joint with this traditional blues song, a song called I Lied to You, which is fantastic in itself. He's got the new guitar that Smoke and Stack have given him. And as he's performing, he is breaking free from the constraints of his conservative father. But then we see another person join Sammy on stage, because Sammy's mystical power begins to manifest during this concert, and we get a man playing the electric guitar, and it just shows how Sammy is able to conjure these spirits throughout history with his music. And the guitarist is almost reminiscent of Jimi Hendrix, and he encapsulates how rock and roll is also rooted in Black culture. And this entire scene is like a history lesson on music. So obviously the blues in particular inspired rock and roll, so it's only natural that this other performer, this rock and roll performer, joins Sammy on stage. But then we get an integration of even more music, because this one-shot scene incorporates various different elements of hip-hop, for example, another popular genre of music that originated in Black culture. It shows people breakdancing, it shows people twerking. We've got trap, we've got G-funk, we've got a DJ on turntables, turning it almost into a nightclub. And then Sammy also manages to conjure his ancestors, and we get this African tribal music. So we've got tribal Africans wearing traditional garb and masks, and they have their own form of dancing and drumming. But Sammy also manages to conjure musical spirits related to Grace and Bo. So while his concert is going on and we weave through the bar and see everyone, we see these Chinese performers reflecting the heritage of Grace and Bo Chow, who were dancing with everyone at the juke joint. It's also known as Chinese opera, and this form of musical theatre has existed in Chinese culture for thousands of years, and it mixes singing and dancing with martial arts to present this stunning acrobatic style of art. And then as we actually pan out from the scene, we can see that the nightclub has come down in flames, which is almost a reference to the roof is on fire, which again is just another layer of absolute wonderfulness that is this film, and this is the scene that made me cry the hardest in the entire film. Just, it is so powerful to see all of this history in music especially, and it really hit me in the feels. Like, it's getting me emotional now just thinking about it. Another reason why I need to go and watch the film again. It seems like such a wacky thing to do in such a period piece of film, but I think it was executed perfectly. It completely hammers home the importance of the film just in that one little scene. The other thing that I want to mention, actually, before we get into some of the theming, is the costuming, because I thought that was brilliant. Obviously, this is an era film, a period film. It's set nearly 100 years ago, down to small things like the fact that Smoke and Stack wear significant colours. So Stack wears red, and his outfit is synonymous with the Italian mafia in Chicago. The fact that he kind of wears this trilby type hat, the tailoring of his suit is Italian, and the red could be seen to represent bloodshed. We've then got Smoke, who wears blue, and his appearance identifies with the Irish mafia in Chicago. He's wearing this kind of baker boy flat cap, and the blue accents could foreshadow his entrance into heaven that we see. But then we also see Sammy. Throughout the film, he's wearing a hat like Stack when he's young, but then when we see that mid-credit scene when he's old, he's wearing a hat like Smoke, which again I think is fascinating. Clearly Sammy looks up to both of his cousins, but in particular he spends most of his time with Stack. Stack is the charmer, he's the one who wants to make all of the money, and clearly Sammy is tempted by all of that. But clearly on reflection, when Sammy is older, he realizes that maybe the person he should have followed more closely is Smoke. And then the other thing, which is less of a costuming thing and more of a brilliant detail with regards to the hair and makeup on this film, we see Sammy right at the beginning of the film and then right at the end with scars on his face. And I saw a couple of videos on TikTok. Apologies, I cannot remember the creators. There were two different ones, but they talk about the fact that the scars that Sammy ends up with on his face are very similar to Yoruba tribal marks. So those claw marks that Remick gives him are very similar to West African, Nigerian tribal marks. And Yoruba is when a child is born, they scar a child's face as a form of cultural identification as part of that tribe, beautification amongst the Yoruba people, and they were also to ward off evil spirits, which I think is just such a brilliant detail. Again, everything that you can look at in this film, there is reason to it. It's not just random. There is depth to it. There is meaning. And I think the entire film is such a melting pot of themes, melting pot of genres as well, because it is a horror. And I'm getting really fed up with people who don't like horror saying, well, no, it's not actually a horror, just because for once they've actually enjoyed a horror. But you've got a crime element in there, the fact that the Smokestack twins have come from working for Al Capone. You've got a thriller element because of that fact. You've got fantastic romance elements, some very sexy moments in the film. It's almost musical because of the songs that we see in there. But then there's also so much subtext to the film, especially from a cultural perspective, with Black people, Irish people, Indigenous people, the Chinese people, because they are all the people that built that land in the Mississippi Delta and broader across America. And I mentioned those creators that I want you to follow at the start of the film. Clark's Capers did a fantastic video on No Irish, No Blacks, No Dogs, talked about how closely linked Irish culture and Black culture has been. I am not going to do it any justice, so please go follow her, watch that film. But I brushed over it very lightly earlier, and I think it's something that is worth referencing. We see a very small scene when Remick first appears. He is fleeing the Choctaw people, and it's particularly significant that Remick is introduced doing so, because not only is the film set in the historic Choctaw homeland, but there is a long history of cooperation between the Choctaw and Native America more broadly, and the Irish, because we've got the Irish potato famine, which occurred 16 years after we had the Choctaw, Cherokee, Muskogee, Seminole, and Chickasaw peoples were forced to walk the Trail of Tears. And knowing their tragedy and hunger themselves, the Choctaw and Cherokee survivors donated hundreds of dollars to support famine relief. And in 2017, Ireland erected the Kindred Spirits sculpture in acknowledgement of the friendship between the two peoples, with a companion sculpture called Eternal Heart, which was installed on Choctaw land in 2024. And when the coronavirus pandemic began in 2020 and the Navajo and Hopi nations were hit especially hard, Ireland sent a $2 million donation, accrediting it to the Choctaw kindness in their time of need. So again, like I said, there is so fucking much to this film. It's not an accident that Remick is Irish. Ryan Coogler has specifically written that with purpose. And I just think all of these little things make the film even more wonderful. This is my absolute favorite type of film where I have to go away and learn and read and think, what did that mean? And who is an expert on this topic that I can talk to about this? Because yeah, I could just wax lyrical about this film for forever, as I'm sure you can tell by now. But I did want to talk about a couple of other themes that I did spot in there. The main one being temptation, and I've seen and heard Ryan Coogler himself talking about the fact that the film is about temptation. And we can see that through so many of the characters, like Smoke and Stack's temptation for money and success, Stack's temptation with Mary, Sammy's temptation with blues music, Delta Slim's temptation with liquor. And actually, The Real Voice did a great breakdown of the 7 deadly sins, because, I mean, the film is called Sinners, so we are going to see sin throughout this film. But he listed that Stack could be seen as greed. He's the driving force behind getting the nightclub and the money. Smoke is wrath. His vengeance is his downfall. He kills the clan members. Sammy is sloth in the religious sense, so the neglect of his spiritual duty, not taking heed from his father. Pearline is lust. She gives in to temptation with Sammy. Delta Slim is gluttony, his drinking. He goes to the Duke for liquor. Remick is envy because he wants that power that Sammy has to conjure spirits with his music. And Grace is pride because she doesn't keep the group safe. I did want to touch on the ending. Obviously, we have almost 3 endings to this film because of those post-credit scenes. I'm so grateful for those post-credit scenes because they just give us that little bit more that we want when we see Sammy returning to the church. When the film does end, though, before we get those post-credit scenes, we see Smoke, who sees Annie and his daughter, and he hears Annie telling him that he can hold the baby if he puts out his cigarette because she doesn't want any of that smoke getting on her. And in that moment, again, this is so clever. By choosing to put out the cigarette, he's literally abandoning Smoke, which is the physical form of his alter ego, which I think is so emotional and powerful because Annie truly sees Smoke for who he is. She doesn't see this alter ego. She sees him, and I think it's absolutely beautiful. We then get that mid-credit scene with Stack and Mary appearing at Sammy's Blues Club in 1992. Stack and Mary look absolutely brilliant. I want to see a film where they're experiencing the 90s because I think that would be really interesting as vampires. But I mentioned it earlier, we've got Buddy Guy, famous blues musician, who is appearing as Sammy as an old man. And another little reference that's in there, Mary is wearing a jacket with a checkerboard design, and Buddy Guy owned a blues bar in Chicago called the Checkerboard Lounge from 1972 to 1985. And I just think that's another wonderful little detail. But the fact that Buddy Guy is in the film itself, I think, is absolutely stunning. Again, Clark's Capers did a fantastic video about Buddy Guy. She knows loads about him. She goes into brilliant detail about who he is and why his appearance in the film is so important. The fact that he was a blues artist in the Jim Crow era. So please go and watch that if you want more detail on that topic. Something else that she did talk about is Robert Johnson, which I mentioned earlier. And I want to wrap up by talking about some comparisons to other films that you can draw from Sinners. One story in particular is that of the legend of Robert Johnson. He was a blues pioneer that came to be known as the King of the Delta Blues. And the story goes that having no musical talent growing up, he sold his soul to the devil after meeting him at a crossroads in exchange for extraordinary musical talent. And Johnson then became the most famed musician of his day, but died at a very young age, 27. He is one of the founding members of the 27 Club, leaving many to suspect that the devil had come to collect his payment. And that's something that we see Sammy's pastor father alluding to, because he says the iconic line, "You keep dancing with the devil, eventually he'll follow you home." So, like I said, go and have a look at Amelia Clarkscaper's account on TikTok or on Instagram, because she also talks about the legend of Robert Johnson and how that is very closely linked to the Sinners film. One other film that has come up time and time again, and I can understand why, is From Dusk Till Dawn. Yes, there are some similarities with regards to the two films. So, comparisons that you can draw are obviously vampires. We've got two brothers, like we do in From Dusk Till Dawn, and we've got a bar. They're basically the only comparisons that you can draw between the two films. Like, I love From Dusk Till Dawn. However, I think it's a ridiculous film. Ridiculous in a really, really fun way, in a B-movie horror way. The vampires have green blood. They are monstrous. The film really lacks cultural relevance, apart from the fact that it is a largely Latino cast, and that is important as well. But there's no real message to the film. And as much as it is fantastic, most people remember From Dusk Till Dawn because Quentin Tarantino likes feet, and we see Selma Hayek with barely anything on pouring tequila down her foot. That is the reason most people remember From Dusk Till Dawn, and that's not poo-pooing it in any way. It is a fantastic, like grindhousey horror film. I really enjoy it, but I think it's wrong to say that Sinners, and this is the phrase that I've heard, Sinners is a rip-off of From Dusk Till Dawn, because hopefully at this point, of all the things that I've mentioned, of all the cultural messages that are in there, of all the layers that there are to this film, Sinners is so much more than just a vampire film. There are so many messages to this film, specifically with regards to Black culture, that it does Sinners a disservice. And I don't think it's fair to compare From Dusk Till Dawn to it either. I don't think it's fair. Like, the two just don't line up. So that's my 2 pence worth anyway on From Dusk Till Dawn. I think it's very superficial and surface level to compare those two films. But I think there are some other nods to some great horror films that are in the film, one of which is The Thing. So we have this brilliant scene where Annie has thrown this pickled garlic juice onto Stack, and it sends him fleeing out the door smoking. So the group that are left decide that to try and save themselves, to try and help themselves in what's to come, they'll eat a piece of pickled garlic each. It's also to try and see, is anyone in the group a vampire that they've not identified yet? And, you know, you get Pearline saying, "Oh, I don't like garlic." I would shoot her there and then if she didn't eat the garlic. Like, if you are hesitating to eat garlic, knowing that that means you are a vampire if you don't, why are you hesitating? I don't care if you don't like it. But that can definitely be seen as a comparison to The Thing with the blood test, which really made me jump the first time I saw it. So I thought that was a really great nod. And then I think there's a really great nod to The Shining as well. So we get Stack as a vampire, and we see him locked in the room, and he is banging his head against the door to try and get out. And I think that's very similar to Jack Torrance in The Shining, where he is banging his head on the door violently because Wendy is on the other side. And it just shows that Ryan Coogler knows his films and knows how to throw in a cheeky little reference here and there for the horror fans. So yeah, that is kind of, in case you haven't guessed by now, fucking loved Sinners. 5 out of 5. If I could give it 10 out of 5, then I would do. it is my film of the year so far. Like, at this point, I'm kind of not counting Nosferatu as a release for this year because it did come out in the US at the very back end of last year. I'd put Nosferatu and Sinners on a level with each other. I think it would be completely impossible for me to choose which I prefer out of those films because I love them for different reasons. I need to own this on physical immediately. I need a behind the scenes, a whole documentary into Ryan Coogler's process, into the filming, the cinematography, the research that was done for the film. So hopefully, I mean, if you've not seen the film and you've decided to listen anyway, I really hope that my rambling has encouraged you to go watch this film. Even if you don't read too much into the meaning of the film, I think you'll have a really great time with it. It is a fun film above anything else, and it is absolutely stunning as well. So I hope you enjoyed that little spoiler review. Don't forget to catch me every Monday with a deep dive into a subgenre of horror, and also every week I bring you the latest horror news in a 10-minute roundup. And if you want to follow me on my socials, I am at Rate Scary on YouTube and Instagram, and at Scary Zara Mary on TikTok, Instagram, Letterboxd, and pretty much every other social media site going. But for now, I'll see thee with you then. I'll see thee soon.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
I guess everyone's entitled to one good scare, huh?
I'll be right back.
Game over. It's all for you.
Beware the moonlights.
An excellent day for an exorcism.
I'm your #1 fan.